Dear friend, thank you for your continuous support. Today we have a new step. We call them Interchange 3. Hopefully we will cover all the book. We have Unit 1, Relative Clauses. Relative clauses is categorized in two. Number 1, defining relative clauses provides essential and a definitive information about the noun. The second kind, we call them non-defining relative clauses, provides extra information about the noun. The differences between the two: the first one, the information needed for the sentences to make it clear what the relative clause we're talking about. The second one, we call them non-defining relative. The information is extra. It means we could delete it and then we put comma after the relative pronoun. Defining relative pronoun can be structured by either. Defining relative clauses, we said, can be structured by either relative pronoun or relative adverb. Relative pronoun connect nouns or pronouns to the relative clauses, providing essential or non-essential information. We have relative pronoun divided into, we have three kinds. We have who, which refers to people in American English, then could come as a subject or as an object. For example, the man who, or you could say that, called me last night was my uncle. The second one, I called my cousin who, or that you saw last week. If we go back to the sentences, if we look here, we see who, which comes instead of the subject. And then we go to the second sentences, we see who, it comes instead of the object. In that case, we say who in American English could work or could substitute the subject or the object. The second one, we have which referring to animals and things, could come as a subject or as an object. The dog, which or that is playing in the garden, is our neighbor dog. The second sentence is, I fed the dog which or that Sarah bought last week. Let's go back again to the sentences. If we look here, the pronoun here, the relative pronoun, it works instead of the subject. We go to the second sentences, we see here which works as an object. Then we have a little difference between American English and British English. For American English, we use who for both, for as the subject or as an object. In British English, we use whom referring to people in a British English, and also only works as an object. For example, my father works for Sardar whom or that you invited yesterday. If we look here, we see whom comes instead of the object. The differences between who or whom for the subject and then whom for the object. For the subject, we cannot delete it. But for the object, we see here who or that we could delete. Same thing here. Whom, we could delete the whom. And also when we have here which come instead of the object, let's look how we structure the relative clauses. In a sentences, first we look for it. We have subject, could be verb or could be auxiliary verb. We have object, sometimes we have complement. The second sentences also we have subject, verb, auxiliary, object or complement. Who, use it for subject, we said in American English. Let's say here we look at for the subject. If we look to the sentences here, the officer arrested the man. The second sentences here we have the man robbed our house. If we look to the two sentences, we see here the officer is the subject, then we arrested is the verb, And then we have here the man, which works as the object. If we look to the second sentences, we see here the man, which works as the subject. Then we have robbed, then our house will be object. How we make relative pronoun? For example, we have to join sentences in one sentences. We're gonna make those two as one sentences. Then we're gonna have the formula: subject, verb, auxiliary. Then we have the object, because here we have object here. Then we substitute the subject here by who. Then we continue the whole formula. Let's look how we're gonna do this kind of sentences. For example, we're gonna say the officer arrested the man. That's from the first sentences. Then continue from the second sentences, because here we have the common between the two sentences is the man. Here we have it in the object. Here we have it in the subject. Then we have to delete one of them. Then we go here, we say the officer arrested the man. Then the second man, we're going to substitute it by who, or sometime by that. Then we look here, those two are the same in the two sentences. That's how because this pronoun is describing the sentences here. I like the person. Then the second sentences could be he or she has a good manner. We say first step, we look to the common between the two sentences. We have here I as subject, then like is the verb, then the person is the object. We look here to the second sentence. We have he or she, then has a good manner. The common between the two sentences is the person here. Then for the second one could be one of this, could be she or he. Sometimes we have it here. Then we have to join those two sentences as to make one sentence, as we did here. For example, I like the person. That's from the first sentences. Then from the second sentences, because here we have it in the object, here we have it in the subject. Then we continue with the second sentences, who or that has a good manner. If we look here, still we have the two common between the two sentences. Then we have it here. We have subject, verb, auxiliary, object. Second sentence, subject, verb, auxiliary, object. We use which. We use which for subject, animal, and things. Let's look to the sentences. I like to work for a company. That's my first sentences. The second sentences, the company offers healthcare benefits. We say the first step, we look what's the common between the two sentences. If we look here, we have the company here, or a company. Then the second one we have here, the company. Here we have it, it comes as object. Here we have it as in the subject. Then we have to join those two sentences in one sentence, as we did here. For example, I like to work for a company. Okay, this from the first sentences. Then the second one we start, which or that offers healthcare benefit. That's for my second sentences. If we look here back again, we have those two as a common between the two sentences. That's how we make relative clauses. Sarah lives in Dog City. That's my first sentences. Second one, Dog has many tourist resorts. As we said it, we look for the common between the two sentences. We have here Dog City. Then the second one we have Dog. Dog City has many tourist resorts. Then we have Dog City has many tourist resorts. The common, here we have as object. Here the second sentence we have as the subject. We have to make those two as one sentences. Then we call it relative clauses. We say, Sarah live in Dog City. That's my first sentences. The second one, which or that has many tourist resorts. The common is toxicity. Then we substituted toxicity by which or that. Let's use now who or whom for object describing human. As we said it in the beginning, we use who for in American English for both as the subject or substituting the object. Then whom we use it only in British English for substituting the object. Let's look to our sentences. Sardar is the manager. Then we say here, I saw him last night. If we look to the two sentences, what's the common between the two sentences? We have here the manager, then we have the second one, him, as a pronoun for it. Then we have to join the two sentences in one to make a relative clauses. Then we're gonna have subject, verb, auxiliary, then with object, then could be whom or who. Sometimes we substitute both of them with that. Subject, verb, auxiliary. Then look to the sentences. Sardar is the manager. That's for my first sentences. Then the second sentences we say whom or that I saw last night. This is if you remember we said we use whom in British English. Okay, we have to remember. Then the second sentence is same thing. We say Sardar is the manager who or that I saw last night. This we said in American English. The differences between who as the subject and then who as the object in American English. Who we could delete it. For example, we have it here. Who or that. We could delete both of them. Same thing here. Then we could say whenever we have a relative pronoun that comes as the object, we could delete it. For example, here, we could delete this. Same thing, we could do it here. Okay? Only when we have the pronoun comes as the object. I want to work with the salesperson. That's my first sentences. The second one, I can trust him. Then the comment between the two, then we have here the salesperson. This is from the first sentences. Then from the second sentence, we have him as the salesperson. Then we have to join both of them because here we have instead of the object. Here also we have instead of the object. Then we could say, I want to work with the salesperson whom or that I can trust. Then we have the two here, the comment between the two sentences. Then we say the salesperson, and then here, because it comes as substituting the object. If you remember, we said whenever we have it, when we have who or whom, instead of the object, we could delete them. Okay, let's continue with the second one. I want to work with the salesperson. First sentences. Then the second one, who or that I can trust. Then we have the comment between the two, the salesperson, who and that. That's the comment between all the two. And then if you remember, we said when it comes who or whom or that, then in the position of the object, we could delete them. Okay, as we did here, I want to work with the salesperson I can trust. Now let's go when we use which as the object describing things, an animal. For example, I fed the cat. That's my first sentences. The second sentences, Sarah bought it last week. That's my second sentences. If we look to the comment between the two, we have the first one, the cat, which comes as the object. Here we have same thing, it, referring to the cat as the object. Then we have the two as one sentences. We say, I fed the cat. Then we continue with the pronoun, which or that Sarah bought last week. Then similar, we said that there's not too common between the two. If you remember, we said when we have which or that or whom or who that comes in the position of the object, only we could delete it. For example, we could say the second sentences. I like the novel. Sam gave it to me yesterday. Let's look what we have in common here. We have the first one, the novel. Then the second one we have here, it. Then we make it as one sentence as we said it. Then we say, I like the novel. Then we say which or that Sam gave to me yesterday. We have to be careful whenever we substitute the pronoun or the noun with the pronoun, we have to delete the noun here or the pronoun. For example, here we have which, that, which we substituted instead of it. And then if you remember, we said when it comes instead of the object, we could delete them. Okay, could be the sentence of like this. I like the novel Sam gave to me yesterday. We have some notes for you for this subject. We have here who and which are exchangeable in relative clauses with that. Here it means we could change those two, substitute them with that. Only when it's used in definite or something because the information are essential for the sentences. It means here we don't put comma before which or who. Then we could substitute them with that. However, do not exchange who and which with that when constructing non-defining relative clauses. If you remember, we said it. Because comma cannot be used in front of that. That's the differences, because we said we have two kind of relative clauses. We have defined, sometimes we say identifying, then we have non-defined. The non-defined, then we put comma, because we cannot put comma in the front of that. That's the reason we cannot switch who or which instead of that. I live in Dog City. Because Dog City is known, then we say which is a nice place to live in. Because here, if you see here, we put comma because this is defined, because we know with Dog City, Sarah lives in Dog City, which is a nice place. You could say Sarah lives in Dog City, a nice place to live in. Sarah lives in Dog City, which is a nice place to live in. Because this is non-defined, because we don't need this. Without that reason, we put comma here. Then we go to the second one. Sarah lives in Dog City. Then here we cannot put comma, because here, because we have that is a nice place to live in. That's the reason we say not always we can switch which and who or whom with that, only in defining or identifying the relative clauses. For non-defined, then because we add comma, because the information are extra, then we cannot put that here in front of that comma. No comma before that. Thank you very much for listening.